Alright, so today we're going to look at The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. So, this poem is one that's been studied a lot. We are going to take a look at alliteration as our poetic device. So, that's the repeated use of similar consonant sounds at the beginnings of words or sometimes at the beginnings of new syllables. So, we're going to read through and I'm just going to highlight those examples. Two roads diverged in yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, was just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, so I can see that example, though as for the passing there, had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trod in black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. And I'm really noticing that W is repeated again, but it also blends with that W from the end of how. I shall be telling this with a sigh, some are ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. So now what we've done is we've taken a look at this poem. We have indicated where we found alliteration. I have students in the past who have said that ages and ages is alliteration. Well, first of all, it begins with vowel sounds. And then secondly, I would see that more as repetition than alliteration because they're so close together. Let's begin to indicate our rhyme scheme. So you can see that I've started in the first stanza. I have my A, B, A, B rhyme scheme. So looking at would, stood, could, and then both and undergrowth. Let's continue into the second stanza. So when we take a look at the second stanza, one thing to keep in mind, we could start with C, D, C, C, D, or you can continue with A, B. If you're going on to study English in university, this will be a stylistic choice. Your supervisor, your professor might give you a specific rule to follow. Right now, I'm just saying it's up to you. Just try to be consistent. So we have A, B, B. Okay. A, B, B. A, B, and B. So consistently we have an A, B rhyme scheme. So the next thing that I want to do is I really want to identify a message here. So I'm just going to take a look at actually a line down here which says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, some are ages and ages hence. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. One thing I'm honing in on a little bit is this all the difference. I feel like this line is left intentionally vague or ambiguous because of the fact that this difference could be either positive or negative. And so the choices that we make lead us to either a positive or a negative conclusion. And that sigh, that vague sigh, could be a sigh of relief, of happiness, or of regret. So I think that this vague or ambiguous sigh is connected to the meaning of the poem where we have a positive or a negative difference in our lives based on the decisions that we make. One thing that I'm noticing about the rhyme scheme, this pattern, it just continues. Despite what's happening, it just continues. So one reason we'd look for a disruption in a rhyme scheme is because it often points out a key turning point in the poem. Well, this poem starts at the beginning of a diverging path, which many of you have probably already identified as a metaphor for the choices we make in life. And you have to choose, do I want to go this way or do I want to go this way? And in the morning, both paths had been clear. There's one that seems to have been taken quite a lot more, and there's one that has not been taken. So I see this continuation of the rhyme scheme as actually being representative of how time continues to move us forward into that end stanza where we are ages and ages hence. So we start at this beginning where there's a turning point in our life, and it just leads steadily, steadily, and consistently toward the end. So I see this steady and consistent rhyme scheme as being similar to time and how time just pushes forward. So I'm just going to put that in here, that I see the rhyme scheme as pushing us forward. So I'm filling up my graphic organizer, and this is the exemplar of Poetic Analysis graphic organizer. You're going to get an assignment copy with a different poem. Here I have a copy of the poem, and just remembering that poems have quotation marks around the title. So my first question is, what is the author's message? So after my annotation of the poem, I'd pulled out so many key pieces of information related to the rhyme scheme, related to the author's message, and all of that. So what do I think is the author's message? Well, I think that it's going to have something to do with the idea of our choices having either positive or negative consequences. So even if you have a different interpretation, that's okay, because in English class, all we have to be able to do is give a strong support for why we have chosen what we have chosen. So my author's message that I came up with is, in the road not taken, people's choices determine their future happiness, and since choices have natural consequences, it is imperative that people make the choices that will lead to happiness, as it is almost impossible to go back to a point in history to try again. So I'm going to have to now defend using proof that this is the author's message. And I've said here that this does not have to be a quote. For your author's message piece, you might have to pull from different examples, and I'm all right if you paraphrase professionally here. We do want to keep a formal academic tone, so please don't use personal pronouns, but paraphrasing information from the poem is fine. Included references to the overarching metaphor of the poem, as well as the rhyme scheme. So I'm really trying to bring this all together when I'm talking about the author's message. Again, here I'm just asking for you to paraphrase because I want it to be an example of all of your knowledge about the poem, rather than kind of an academic paper where you're really pulling those quotes. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how the example shows this is the author's message. Then I'm going to go into form and content, where I'm going to say what poetic device I chose and how that enhances the author's message. I'm going to include an example from the poem that shows this, and this should be a quote. Reference my exemplar when it's posted to your D2L learning space.